Canada is stepping into a new kind of global spotlight. For the first time, a non-European leader has been invited to join the European Political Community Summit, and that leader is Prime Minister Mark Carney. This moment is more than just a diplomatic visit. It reflects a changing global order where traditional alliances are shifting and countries like Canada are being asked to play a more active role. Subscribe to Canada Now for clear, unbiased Canadian news explained simply. According to political commentator Scott Reed, this invitation is a sign of recognition.
Let's now bring in CTV News political commentator and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Paul Martin, Scott Reed, in this conversation. Scott, great to see you.
Good to see you.
So it's the first time a non-European leader has joined this European Political Community Summit. What do you make of Canada's position at this forum?
Well, first of all, I do think we should be flattered as a country for the invitation, because it is a reflection of how America is rewriting the rules, how the rest of the world is struggling to figure out how do we accommodate this, and the degree to which the world is looking to the speech that Prime Minister Carney gave in Davos as maybe an indication of how we do that. So I do think, we can look at it and say, well, there's a little bit of a tip of the hat there. But the reason that Mark Carney is going is not for that. He is going because he will, as Graham just mentioned, accept any invitation anywhere that puts him in rooms with European leaders so that he can strengthen our economic ties, strengthen our trade ties, strengthen investment ties. He is on a relentless campaign to try to draw people from around the world, and particularly Europe, to Canada, because we are going to have to offset some of the risks that America is creating for our economy.
The previous Liberal governments, Scott, we saw weighed in on a few times on the ethnic conflict in the region with Azerbaijan and Armenia. And this Prime Minister, we haven't really seen him talk about that much, even though he's going to be in the capital of Yerevan in Armenia. Why is that the case?
Well, it's interesting. I mentioned the Davos speech. One of the standout lines in the Davos speech, and it drew criticism from some people, was we must accept the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. The implication for our foreign policy is that we will no longer necessarily prioritize the idea that we will advocate on the world stage primarily for a number of human rights issues or trying to champion the causes of other countries, that instead will be driven by much more practical, pragmatic, and economic objectives. It's going to be interesting to see how the Prime Minister handles that balance. How much of the time when he's in Armenia does he speak about domestic conflicts, regional conflicts? How much does he say this is what should occur versus how much is he just there to try to secure transactional objectives? People will be watching very carefully for that.
By the looks of it, Scott, it seems as though the foreign policy here in the country has shifted, because like you're also pointing out, it's more about now advancing economic, relations, trade. That's the agenda, because it's not just about Armenia today. We have seen that shift gradually take place, whether it was with China or India for that matter, and even Saudi Arabia in a couple of years.
Well, it sort of comes back to the observation that Mr. Carney made. This is the world that we live in now. So in a world where China is China, India is India, and suddenly it appears as though the U.S. has turned on us all, do we have to instead focus our attentions, our foreign policy, on self-interest? Do we have to move rather from this idea of trying to advance our broader public interest and human values, trying to project our values around the world, to trying to secure objectives, trying to secure transactional deals? And that's got to be the real politic of where we are. And people are right to observe that that is what's driving our foreign policy right now. And frankly, not everyone in Canada supports that, but it would appear that a majority of Canadians do.
All right, we leave it at that then. CTV News political commentator Scott Reed, always a pleasure. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
It shows that the world is paying attention to how Canada is positioning itself as global dynamics evolve. But at the same time, this visit is not just symbolic. Carney's objective appears to be highly strategic. He is using opportunities like this to meet European leaders, strengthen relationships, and build deeper economic ties. That includes trade, investment, and long-term cooperation. The reasoning behind this approach is clear. Canada is increasingly looking to reduce its reliance on the United States and expand its global partnerships. Recent developments have created uncertainty in global trade, especially involving the U.S. As a result, Canada is exploring new ways to protect its economic stability. Meetings like the European Political Community Summit provide a platform to do exactly that.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is off to Armenia this weekend for meetings with European leaders about strategic issues that touch on defense and the economy. He'll be attending the European Political Community Summit, and it's the first time that a country that's not inside Europe is part of these meetings. These meetings have been going on since the 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and they touch on how to better economically integrate the continent and to deal with strategic issues around defense. These meetings include not just the EU, but other countries like Iceland, Britain, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. And they're meant to sort of shore up Europe's way of responding to these broader issues, whether it's coming from Russia and defense concerns, China with economic concerns, and lately, what's going on in Washington. Carney's office has framed these meetings as a way to advance Canada's diversification, specifically after a defense deal signed last year, in which Canada can work with European defense firms on contracts and secure loans from the EU. Canada's also trying to diversify trade and double non-US exports by 2030. And so his office has really framed this as a way for Carney to get face time with European leaders, especially after being invited to this summit by the European Union and the host Armenia. The visit itself is looking to be about a day and a half. We know that the Armenian government would like Canada to continue to be involved in the region. The Prime Minister's office, in its news release about the trip, had a line about accepting the world as it is. So we'll be watching as Carney heads to Armenia about how much he'll be talking about the actual issues within the Caucasus region and how much of this is really focused on trade within Europe.
The summit itself was created after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia. It brings together European countries and partners to discuss defense, economic coordination, and broader geopolitical challenges. Participants include members of the European Union, along with countries like the United Kingdom, Turkey, Armenia, and others. Canada's presence in this forum signals a growing role beyond North America. It reflects a broader strategy to engage more directly with Europe, particularly in areas like defense collaboration and economic integration. In fact, Canada has already taken steps in that direction. A recent defense agreement allows Canadian companies to work more closely with European firms, opening access to contracts and financing opportunities. At the same time, the government aims to significantly increase exports beyond the United States by 2030. But beyond trade and economics, this visit raises important questions about Canada's foreign policy direction. Traditionally, Canada has emphasized human rights and democratic values on the global stage. However, recent statements from Prime Minister Carney suggest a shift toward a more pragmatic approach. One idea that stands out is accepting the world as it is, rather than how we wish it to be. This suggests that Canada may now prioritize practical outcomes, such as economic agreements and strategic partnerships, over broader value-based diplomacy. In other words, foreign policy may become more focused on national interest and measurable results. This shift can already be seen in Canada's approach to countries like China, India, and Saudi Arabia. Instead of focusing mainly on ideological differences, there is a growing emphasis on maintaining relationships that support economic growth and stability. Not everyone agrees with this direction. Some believe Canada should continue to focus strongly on human rights and global advocacy. Others argue that in today's complex world, A more practical strategy is necessary to remain competitive and protect national interests. As Prime Minister Carney travels to Armenia for this summit, observers will be watching closely. One key question is how he balances these priorities. Will he address regional conflicts and political tensions, or will the focus remain on economic cooperation and strategic partnerships? The answer could shape how Canada positions itself on the global stage in the years ahead. At the same time, this visit highlights a broader reality. The global system is evolving. Power is becoming more distributed, alliances are shifting, and countries are adapting to new economic and political conditions. For Canada, this means finding new ways to stay relevant, competitive, and secure in an increasingly uncertain world. And that is why this moment matters. Subscribe to Canada Now for more clear, unbiased explanations of what's happening in Canada and around the world.